We all have these pockets in our lives full of darkness, and we hope that this morning the light and love of Jesus shines not only in your heart, but shines on your path so you can see, trust, and love Jesus. So I want to begin this morning with a question, and the question is this: what do you see? Now, some of you say, I see a good-looking middle-aged man. I know, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this right here. Let me try and get out of the way so as most folks can see. You see this picture right here in the middle. What do you see? Anyone see some people? Anybody? Anyone see a vase? Yeah, okay. Half of you are right, half of you are wrong. Okay, but let's keep asking this question. What do you see? Let me take a look at this next picture. Oh yeah, that one's breathtaking. Here we go, next picture. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. What do we see here? Anyone see a duck? Anyone see a rabbit? Okay, I just need to be honest, I could not see the rabbit. Literally, Pastor Lori had to go and walk and point. Hold on, she had to be like, here's the ears, and I'm like, what rabbit has slicked back here? Like, this must be like a teenage rabbit or something like this. And like, here's the eye and here's that. I'm like, I don't know. But when we ask the question, what do you see? It's interesting that folks can see the exact same thing and come to a different conclusion. People can see the exact same thing and come to a different conclusion. Maybe you've experienced this before. You and some friends are walking, you're out about, and you see a long line. And some of the people are like, that line is too long, I'm not doing it. And others say, long line, that must be awesome, sign me up. You know who you are in that group. Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes you and someone you love have a relationship with someone at work, or you have a relationship with someone in your family, and one of you like, that person's awesome. And the other one, that person's awful. You say, well, it's subjective. Well, sometimes even less subjective things. Well, that's what I thought. I remember one time the dentist said, hey, you've got all these different cavities. I'm like, what? My oral hygiene's a little better than that. And so I took it to a second opinion, one of my friends who's a dentist. And he's like, yeah, I can see why I said it, but I have a different opinion. And I'm like, y'all are scientists, folks. Y'all can't agree on this? They saw the same x-rays, had a different response. Same thing's true in faith. I've walked with enough people who have experienced significant pain, maybe the pain of a diagnosis, a divorce or broken relationship, or maybe they see evil in the world and they look at that pain, and some people look at it and say, if that exists in this world, I cannot love and trust a God who allows those types of things to happen. That's just wrong. And some folks look at those things and say, that is why I want to love and trust God, because I know that there's a problem bigger than I can solve. And I don't want to live in a world where evil wins. Same exact thing, two different results. How is it possible that people can see the same thing and come to different results? Well, here's my spoiler for you. Here's my hint of where we're going. Sometimes what you see and what you interpret says more about you than it does the image. Now, I don't know if I'm right about this, but when I saw that first picture, I for sure saw two people. And then they said there was vases there, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's because I see people and everything, because my life's all about people. Maybe if I was a florist, I'd see a vase. Now, I'm not saying that is true or not true, but what I'm saying is what you see sometimes says more about you. And today, that's what we're gonna see. We're gonna look at two people who have relatively the exact view of Jesus as we can see. In Luke chapter 23, Jesus is being crucified. And one on his left, one on his right, there's these two other criminals who are being crucified. Well, why are they being crucified? You see, crucifixion back in this day was a group project. What had happened was when there was a uprising or a threat of an uprising, the Romans would crucify multiple people at the same time. And in Luke 23, the passage we're about to look at, this story, it's during the time of Passover, which means the city of Jerusalem has swelled to 5, maybe 10 times its normal size. People are coming back to remember the celebration of when God delivered the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Oh yeah, it's like some 4th of July vibes, but with less fireworks and more freedom. And so Rome's like, no, we're not gonna have any of that. We're gonna crucify you and you and you. We don't know how many folks are there at this crucifixion, There's one first century account of not of this crucifixion, but of another one, of Rome crucifying over 1,000 people on a popular thoroughfare. Now that's probably an exaggeration, but you get the idea. They want everyone to see this is what happens when you mess with Rome, you will find out. And these two folks hanging right next to him have 180-degree different directions interpretation of who Jesus is. But what I want to look at is why. And what does that say about you and me? Because be honest, it's going to say more about us than it does about Jesus. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and go to Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23, we'll begin reading in verse 32. Again, we've been walking through this series called Encounters, where we're looking at people who've had life-changing encounters with Jesus. The big idea of this series is that just as people had life-changing encounters with God then, we have the same now. And God, the way he interacts with people then is how he interacts with people now. And so what we're hoping is you look at these stories, you don't see something that happened 2,000 years ago. You see something that God may be doing in you today. So today I want you to put yourself in the shoes of these two thieves and ask yourself, which view of Jesus looks more like you? And what does your view of Jesus say not only about Jesus, but also about you? Two criminals who are being made a public image. Last thing I'll say about these criminals. Some people have said they're thieves, maybe. Some say that they are political insurrectionists. We don't know. They could have been trying to lead an uprising against Rome, or maybe they were trying to steal something from a wealthy person, or just trying to steal to feed their own family. We don't know what got them there. But we know what happens when they get there. Here we go. We're in Luke chapter 23, verse 32. Two other men, both criminals, who were led out with Jesus to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him along with the other criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood there watching, and the rulers sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up to him and mocked him. They offered him wine, vinegar, and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there insulted him, hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you're under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said to Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." You have these two men up there, both guilty of a crime, both having relatively the same experience. But how is it that one of them looks at him and insults him, and one of them says, "Look." Now, here's the thing. We don't know what their backstory is. We don't know if this is the first time they've seen Jesus or they've been watching his public ministry for 3 years. We don't know if they are people of great faith who believe that there will be a Messiah who comes and this isn't it, or maybe they just don't believe in all that Messiah nonsense anyway. That's just some fairy tale to give people hope. We don't know. So we've only got to look at what we actually do know. What do we know about these two? Their crime? No. Their background with Jesus? No. What friends and family are surrounding them? No. Here's what we do know, and that's what makes it simple. One hurled insults, and the other one says this: "Don't you fear God? Don't you realize there's a good and just God who punishes those who deserve it? And don't you realize that this man, Jesus here, doesn't deserve it?" One says Jesus doesn't deserve it, and one says mock him. What is the one and only difference this text shows us? It's the one and only difference that we look inside them and see. One of them looks at him and realizes, I'm guilty and I deserve this. The other one looks at him and just says, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm mocking him, and in no way takes accountability for his own actions. And instead of focusing on his own shortcoming, what he does is he redirects and focuses on someone else. Maybe because he doesn't think he did anything wrong, because he committed the crime for a good reason. Maybe because he doesn't believe that Jesus is innocent. Maybe he's just angry and he just can't deal with the overwhelming pain and shame of it. Maybe he's trying to distract himself from whatever it is. But in this moment, the key to seeing Jesus is not just seeing who Jesus is, but seeing who you are. I wrote it in my notes this way so you can remember. Those of you taking notes, I wrote it this way. Seeing Jesus clearly starts with seeing ourselves honestly. Seeing Jesus clearly starts with seeing ourselves honestly. Let me give you an example. For years, people have experienced freedom from addiction through AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the things I love about it, it's based on Christian principles, but they've changed the language to make it more palatable to a broad audience. But it starts with this idea that I have a problem and I can't fix it myself. We have a ministry like that called Celebrate Recovery that meets here on Wednesday nights. And it says, all human beings have hurts, habits, and hangups. But what happens is when you step into that room, what you're saying is, I realize that I have a problem that I cannot solve myself. Maybe you've done this before. Maybe you saw that you had a plumbing problem at your house. And you're like, I don't know what I need to do, but if I go to Home Depot, use some YouTube and I get the right tools, then I can do it. And then you come back and you work on it and your partner's like, hey, you fixed it yet? Nope. Well, what's going on? I don't know. There's just more water coming out of it than there used to be. Why? Because I thought I could fix it myself. And then I realized the problem was bigger. That's what the one thief realized, is they had a problem and God was the picture of perfection, and they were the picture of imperfection. Friends, this is the key. This is what unlocks a relationship with Jesus, is when you're able to come and be honest about your own sin and shortcoming, and you look at him and realize he's perfect. You look at yourself and realize, I am guilty and he is innocent. When you look at him, you say, that is the picture of love. What is the picture of love? This is a God who becomes a human being to die on a cross. And not just die on a cross, but while he's dying, what does he do? If I was Jesus, which I'm not, if I was Jesus and I'm there being crucified, I'm not saying, Father, forgive them for they didn't know what they do. I'd be, hey, Father, make sure you get all of their names, because when I'm resurrected in 3 days, I'm gonna come back and be like, check me out. What does Jesus do? I don't deserve it. Nope. Forgive them. When you see the love of Jesus, who's able to forgive those who've done the worst to him and they haven't even asked for forgiveness yet, when you see the love of Jesus, when you see the light of Jesus, it more clearly reflects the darkness in our own hearts. So let me just ask you this, friends. Will you take the posture of that thief, or maybe someone coming in for recovery, and come before God and say, God, I'm here not because I'm a good person, not because I prayed enough. And you realize that it's not my goodness, but it's God's grace that transforms. And so what does he say? He says, remember me in your kingdom. Remember me in your kingdom is one of the silliest statements you could ever make. Why? Jesus is literally dying on a cross. He's being accused of what? It says it right over top. You see, that's what they put over the top of the person being executed head. It says what crime they committed. And what crime did they commit? Claiming that he was the king of the Jews. And now he's about to die. And this man says, remember me. Now, some of you, that doesn't seem silly. Let me explain it this way. I get to coach both my boys' basketball teams, and I love it. Not this past Friday, but the Friday before, we were going into the final quarter, and one of my kids looked at me and said, Coach, why are we playing the final quarter? And I'm like, because that's what your parents signed up to do. And he said, no. He's like, we are down 40-5 going into the final quarter. We are not going to win. And I said, you are right, but we're gonna do it anyway. Why? Because life is full of hard things. It's about learning how to do hard things, and that's gonna be a great life motto. And he just said, I'm gonna sit here, put someone else in. In his defense, he's not wrong. We were gonna lose. Look at the faith of this man who looks at Jesus on the cross and says, even though he's within a breath of his life, something inside of him said, this man's gonna overcome death, crucifixion, Rome, rejection by religious leaders. That is some kind of faith, friends. And I believe that type of faith comes when you realize that you are not God. You don't make the rules. We rarely keep the rules. But there's a God who loves us even so much that when we don't do it right, even when we deserve the punishment, even when we deserve crucifixion, even when we deserve the punishment, he says, let me take the punishment for them. Some of you are like, I don't understand all this. Some of you are like, I don't get this. We're singing songs about blood and being made washed white. I don't understand, I don't get that. Some of you are like, why is Jesus even dying on the cross in the first place? Some of you are saying, how does this man believe that there's gonna be something? What does this mean? Here's a story to help you understand what's happening, that helps you understand why Jesus is on the cross and what's about to happen next week on Easter Sunday, or what we celebrate next week on Easter Sunday. The story goes like this. There was a king who was known for being just. And the good thing about his justice is it wasn't just for those who he liked. It wasn't just for those who could pay him back. He was just and fair to everyone in the land, from the most to the least wealthy, the most to the least powerful, those who were closest to him and those who were farthest from him. And one day, a man came in and said, while my son was walking across the road, he was run over and he was killed. How could a good king let this happen in this society? And how are we gonna find out who it was that did it? And what's their punishment gonna be? If you are a good and fair God and my son is dead, what are you gonna do? So they sent for an investigation throughout the land to say, who was it? They searched high and low and everywhere, far and wide. And what they found out is they actually didn't have to look that far. They didn't have to look outside the palace because the one who ran him over was the king's son, the prince. And so the king has this choice. I can be just and give my son what he deserves, or I can throw justice away and just turn a blind eye because I don't like what it does. Everyone stands and waits and watches and says, what's the king gonna do? The king stands up and everyone's on the edge of their seat. He walks over, he looks at the man who's lost his son, he looks at his own son, and he says, justice will be done. The son, his eyes begin to water. He looks down in shame. He can't look at his father in the eye after what he's done. And the king says, justice will be done and the price will be paid, life for life. But the king says, my son will not be put to death. I will be put to death in his place. Because yes, I am a God of justice. And yes, I am a God of love. We serve a heavenly king who is both a king of justice, who wants to see wrongs made right, but he's also a God of love, and in his love, he says, I will pay the price for you, even before you've committed or admitted to the crime. This is the overwhelming love of God that thief, that criminal saw on the cross. But the heartbreaking thing, even though Jesus is there as close to him as he could be, closer to Jesus than you or I may ever get, and he still missed it. Because the question to both of them is the same question to you. What do you see? What do you see? So let's take a look at some pictures and ask this question. What do you see? I look at it and I can't help but see the contrast here of one looking towards Jesus and one looking away. I can't help but wonder who else is there. You see these folks, the fluffy hat, the nice horse. You see there's folks who are wealthy, maybe they're royalty, maybe they're military. But you also see folks who are peasants. I see this, I wonder, maybe, just maybe, this is Jesus' mother grieving, looking up at her one and only son who died. And every single one of these people have to ask the question that you and I do. What do you see? Next slide. See this painting done by an Ethiopian artist. And what do you see? I see that even in Jesus' darkest hour, the light and love of God shines down on him. I see that I got questions about this guy right here in the white robe. Does the white symbolize his true purity because of his heart towards God, and that he's going to receive God's gift of his shed blood cleansing him? Or is the white only as deep as his clothes, and his righteousness is only superficial? And because he looks the part, he's more like the thief that rejected him. I don't know. But as we look at this last image, next picture together, the question isn't just, what do they see? The question is, what do you see? Friends, this might be the most important question you ever ask and answer. When you look at Jesus, what do you see? And when you look at yourself, what do you see? On with this, the theologian John Calvin says this. He says, you cannot know God without knowing self. You cannot know self without knowing God. He calls it the double knowledge paradox. That the more we see God and his perfection, the more it reveals our imperfection. The more we see that there's something wrong with us, it highlights the perfection of Jesus. And the more we get to know him and the way he created us, you understand that some of those longings and desires in you were longing and desires that he hardwired into you. But you also realize that there's longing and desires in you that do not reflect who he is and what he wants for you. And today we ask the question, what do you see? So I invite you to a moment of reflection. This moment I invite you to get comfortable, maybe close your eyes, maybe place your palms face up as a sign of attention to God. And maybe as you pray, you say in your own words to Jesus what you see when you see him. In this moment, take a brief second just to say thank you to him in your own words. Maybe like the criminal, you see your own guilt. And in your own mind and heart, this is a time just for you to confess that to God. Because scripture says that if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us. And we don't have to walk out with the guilt and shame, but we can trade that for his righteousness. So in this moment, maybe have a time of confession and allow God to purify your heart and mind. And now you respond. Maybe you stand and sing at the top of your lungs. Maybe you kneel where you are in awe of the gracious King. Maybe you pray that as you walk out those doors, you'll be transformed by him. Maybe you think of someone in your life who you see on a cross next to him that you want to experience the light and love of Jesus, and you pray for them because you know they can't see their own shortcomings and need for a Savior. The most powerful posture you can take is not a posture that says, I have all the power, but a posture of humility that says, I can receive from God that which I cannot do for myself. And from that posture, we respond and worship Jesus together.